The Winter Palace in St. Petersburg, Russia, is one of the most iconic buildings in the world, known for its opulent architecture and historical significance. But beneath the splendor lies a darker history, a history stained by blood, betrayal, and revolution. In October 1917, during the final days of the Russian Empire, the Winter Palace became the focal point of the October Revolution, when the Bolsheviks stormed the palace, overthrowing the provisional government and setting the stage for the rise of Soviet power. Today, the Winter Palace is part of the Hermitage Museum, but those who walk its halls say that the ghosts of the past still linger, haunting the site where history was forever changed. Visitors and staff have reported strange occurrences: the sounds of distant gunfire, eerie whispers in the dark, and the faint presence of figures dressed in early 20th century clothing. As the anniversary of the October Revolution approaches, these hauntings seem to intensify, as if the spirits of the past are reliving the chaos and tragedy of that fateful night. In this article, we explore 4 haunting tales from the Winter Palace, each linked to the October Revolution. These stories blend historical fact with eerie supernatural encounters, taking readers deep into the heart of one of the most turbulent periods in Russian history. Story 1. The Ghost of the Tsarina. One of the most famous hauntings in the Winter Palace is that of Tsarina Alexandra, the wife of Tsar Nicholas II. Though the Romanov family was executed in 1918 in Ekaterinburg, it is said that the spirit of Alexandra never truly left the palace, where she had once lived in luxury and isolation. Known for her tragic life, marked by political turmoil, personal loss, and the fall of her family's dynasty, the Tsarina's ghost is believed to wander the halls of the Winter Palace, mourning the collapse of the empire she once ruled. This story comes from Irina, a museum curator who has worked at the Hermitage for over 20 years. She claims to have encountered the ghost of Alexandra on several occasions, particularly during the anniversary of the October Revolution, when the energy in the palace seems to shift and the past feels closer than ever. The Winter Palace, with its grandiose halls, intricate chandeliers, and sweeping staircases, is a place that exudes history. But beneath the opulence is a lingering sense of melancholy. The walls have witnessed the rise and fall of empires, and the air seems to carry the weight of the lives lost during the revolution. Visitors often speak of the feeling of being watched as they walk through the rooms that once housed the Romanov family. The haunting of Tsarina Alexandra is most often reported near the private chambers where she once lived with her husband and children. These rooms, though beautifully restored, are said to hold a sadness that cannot be explained. Cold drafts often sweep through the area, and the scent of roses, Alexandra's favorite flower, sometimes fills the air, even when no flowers are present. Irina's first encounter with the ghost of Tsarina Alexandra occurred during her first year working at the Hermitage. She had always been fascinated by Russian history and felt honored to work in such a historic building, but she had never believed in ghosts until that night. It was late October, and the museum had just closed for the day. Irina was walking through the palace, checking that everything was in order, when she heard a soft rustling sound behind her. She turned, expecting to see one of the cleaning staff, but the hallway was empty. Puzzled, she continued on her way, but the sound persisted, growing louder with each step. As she reached the entrance to the private chambers, Irina saw something that made her blood run cold. Standing at the end of the hallway was a woman, dressed in an elegant gown from another era. Her long dark hair was pinned up, and her posture was regal, but there was something unsettling about her presence. The woman's face was pale, her expression sorrowful, and her eyes seemed to stare right through Irina. For a moment, Irina was frozen in place, unable to move or speak. The woman raised her hand, as if reaching out for something or someone, and then, just as suddenly as she had appeared, she was gone. The hallway was empty, but the scent of roses lingered in the air, and the temperature had dropped several degrees. Over the years, Irina has seen the ghost of Tsarina Alexandra several more times, always near the private chambers and always around the anniversary of the October Revolution. The sightings are brief, but the sorrow in Alexandra's expression is unmistakable. Irina believes that the Tsarina's spirit is trapped in the palace, unable to move on because of the tragic end that befell her family and the collapse of the empire she once ruled. For Irina, the sightings of Tsarina Alexandra have become a reminder of the deep personal and political losses that the Romanov family endured. The Tsarina was a woman who lived through immense tragedy, Irina says. I believe she is still mourning the loss of her family, her position, and her country. Her spirit is bound to the Winter Palace, where she spent some of the most significant moments of her life. The ghost of Tsarina Alexandra serves as a symbol of the fall of the Romanov dynasty and the personal grief that accompanied it. The October Revolution marked the end of centuries of imperial rule in Russia, and Alexandra's presence in the Winter Palace is a reminder of the human cost of that political upheaval. Her ghost, forever mourning, represents the loss of not just a royal family, but an entire way of life. Story 2: The Soldier in the Red Room. The Red Room, once a private study for members of the Russian imperial family, is said to be haunted by the ghost of a soldier who died during the storming of the Winter Palace in October 1917. According to legend, this soldier was one of the young men who defended the palace when the Bolsheviks launched their attack. Though outnumbered and ill-equipped, the defenders fought bravely, but their resistance was ultimately futile. Today, visitors to the Red Room report seeing a figure dressed in a military uniform standing near the large windows that overlook the Neva River. He is often seen staring out into the distance, as if waiting for something that will never come. The Red Room, with its rich red walls and lavish furnishings, is one of the most striking rooms in the Winter Palace. The room is filled with historical artifacts, from portraits of the Russian nobility to antique furniture that once belonged to the imperial family. But despite its beauty, there is a palpable sense of tension in the air, as if the room still holds the energy of the battles fought within its walls. The ghost of the soldier is most often seen near the windows, his figure illuminated by the soft glow of the evening sun. Visitors who have encountered the spirit describe a feeling of overwhelming sadness, as if the soldier is aware that his sacrifice was in vain. Sergei, a security guard at the Hermitage, first encountered the ghost of the soldier while working a night shift. The museum was quiet, the only sound the soft echo of his footsteps as he made his rounds. As he entered the Red Room, he immediately felt a change in the atmosphere. The air was heavier, and a strange chill hung in the room, despite the warmth of the building. As Sergei approached the windows, he saw a figure standing with his back to him, dressed in the uniform of a World War I-era Russian soldier. The man's shoulders were slumped, and his posture was weary, as if he had been standing there for hours. Sergei called out, assuming it was a visitor who had somehow stayed behind after closing, but the figure didn't respond. Curious, Sergei stepped closer, but as he did, the figure turned slowly to face him. The soldier's face was pale, his eyes hollow and expressionless. There was a dark stain on his chest, spreading across his uniform, a gunshot wound. Sergei's heart raced as the soldier stared at him, and for a moment, the room seemed to grow darker, the shadows lengthening across the walls. Then, without warning, the soldier turned back toward the window and vanished, leaving Sergei standing alone in the room, his breath coming in short, panicked gasps. In the days that followed, Sergei couldn't shake the memory of the ghostly soldier. He returned to the Red Room several times, hoping to understand what he had seen, but the soldier did not appear again, at least not immediately. It wasn't until the anniversary of the October Revolution approached that the sightings resumed. Visitors to the museum began reporting strange occurrences in the Red Room. Objects moving on their own, the sound of footsteps when no one was there, and the faint scent of gunpowder in the air. Several people claimed to have seen the soldier standing by the window, his ghostly figure illuminated by the setting sun. Some said they could hear the distant sound of gunfire, as if the battle for the Winter Palace was still being fought in the shadows. Sergei continued to see the soldier on several more occasions, always near the anniversary of the October Revolution. Each time, the figure appeared briefly, standing by the window, as though waiting for something that would never come. Sergei would feel a deep chill and an overwhelming sense of sorrow wash over him, as if he were experiencing the soldier's final moments all over again. The room would grow quiet, the only sound the faint echo of distant gunfire and the muffled cries of battle, sounds that seemed to emerge from the very walls of the palace. On one particularly cold evening in late October, Sergei's experience reached a terrifying climax. He had been on his usual patrol when he entered the Red Room and saw the soldier standing by the window once again. But this time, the figure wasn't alone. Sergei heard the unmistakable sound of boots marching on the stone floor, followed by the soft clink of metal as if a rifle had been slung over a shoulder. He turned to see more figures emerging from the shadows. Other soldiers, their faces pale and gaunt, their uniforms stained with blood. They moved silently, their eyes fixed on the window, their expressions frozen in a mixture of fear and determination. For several moments, Sergei stood frozen in place, watching as the ghostly figures filled the room, the tension in the air growing unbearable. He could hear the distant rumble of cannons, the crack of gunfire, and the shouts of men in the throes of battle. It was as if time had folded in on itself, and Sergei was witnessing a replay of the storming of the Winter Palace, with the spirits of the fallen soldiers reliving their final moments. As the sounds of battle reached a fever pitch, Sergei felt a sudden pressure in his chest, as if the weight of history was pressing down on him. He struggled to breathe, his heart racing, and for a moment he thought he would collapse. But then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the haunting ended. The ghostly soldiers vanished into thin air, leaving the room silent and empty once more. The only sign of their presence was the faint smell of gunpowder lingering in the air. For Sergei, the encounters with the ghostly soldier have left a lasting impression. He no longer doubts the presence of the spirits that haunt the Winter Palace, and he believes that the soldier he saw is one of the many young men who died defending the palace during the October Revolution. "They're still here," Sergei says quietly. "They never left. The battle may have ended, but for them, it's still happening. They're trapped in that moment, reliving it over and over again." The haunting of the soldier in the Red Room serves as a poignant reminder of the human cost of the October Revolution. The storming of the Winter Palace marked the beginning of a new era in Russian history, but it also left behind a trail of blood and loss. The soldiers who defended the palace, many of whom were young and inexperienced, fought bravely, but ultimately fell in the chaos of the revolution. Their spirits, bound to the palace, are a reflection of the unresolved trauma of that violent upheaval, forever echoing through the halls where history was made. Story 3. The Whispering Voices of the Malachite Room. The Malachite Room is one of the most striking rooms in the Winter Palace, known for its stunning green malachite columns and opulent decor. Once a reception room for the imperial family, the Malachite Room witnessed some of the most important moments in Russian history, including meetings between members of the provisional government during the tumultuous days leading up to the October Revolution. But beneath its beauty, the Malachite Room holds a darker secret. Visitors and staff have long reported hearing strange whispering voices in the room, as if unseen figures are engaged in a heated conversation. These voices are said to be the spirits of the provisional government officials who were arrested in the room when the Bolsheviks stormed the palace. Their final, desperate discussions echo through the room to this day, a haunting reminder of the political intrigue and betrayal that led to the collapse of the government. The Malachite Room, with its lavish green decor and intricate gold accents, is a place that exudes power and wealth. The room is often filled with visitors marveling at its beauty, but for those who work in the palace, it is also a place of unease. The air in the room feels charged, as if the energy of the past still lingers just beneath the surface. The whispers are most often heard in the late afternoon or evening, when the room is empty and the palace is quiet. Visitors have described feeling a strange sense of foreboding as they enter the room, as if they are walking into a space where something terrible is about to happen. Anastasia, a tour guide at the Hermitage Museum, has spent years leading visitors through the Malachite Room, recounting the history of the palace and the revolution. But one evening, as she was preparing to close up for the day, she heard something that stopped her in her tracks. The room was empty, the last of the visitors having left hours earlier. Anastasia was checking the display cases when she heard the faint sound of voices coming from the corner of the room. At first, she thought it was a recording, perhaps an audio guide left behind by a tourist. But as she listened more closely, she realized the voices were not coming from any device. They were coming from the walls themselves. The voices were soft at first, barely more than whispers, but as Anastasia stood frozen in place, they grew louder, more urgent. She couldn't make out the words, but the tone was unmistakable, frantic, desperate, as if the speakers were arguing over something of great importance. The conversation seemed to come from all around her, echoing off the Malachite columns and filling the room with a palpable tension. Anastasia felt her heart race as she tried to locate the source of the voices, but the room was empty. The whispers continued for several minutes, rising and falling in intensity before abruptly stopping. The room fell silent once more, but the air was thick with the lingering energy of the conversation, as if the voices had left an imprint on the very fabric of the room. In the days that followed, Anastasia couldn't shake the feeling that she had witnessed something supernatural. She spoke to her colleagues, and to her surprise, many of them had experienced similar occurrences in the Malachite room. Some had heard the whispers, while others had felt a sudden cold draft sweep through the room, despite the fact that the windows were always closed. The whispers in the Malachite room are believed to be the voices of the provisional government officials who were arrested by the Bolsheviks during the storming of the Winter Palace. The room was the site of many important meetings in the days leading up to the revolution, as the government desperately tried to maintain control in the face of growing unrest. The officials, aware that their time was running out, would have engaged in intense discussions about the future of the country and their own fates. When the Bolsheviks stormed the palace, the officials were arrested in the Malachite room, their final moments of freedom spent in a room that had once symbolized power and prestige. Today, the whispers are a haunting reminder of the fear and uncertainty that permeated the palace during those final hours. As the anniversary of the October Revolution approaches, the activity in the Malachite room seems to increase. Anastasia and other staff members have reported hearing the whispers more frequently, sometimes late at night when the palace is closed to the public. The voices seem to grow louder as the date of the revolution draws nearer, as if the spirits of the provisional government officials are reliving their final hours over and over again. In one particularly chilling incident, a group of visitors reported hearing the sound of heavy footsteps in the Malachite room, followed by the unmistakable clinking of chains. The sound grew louder, as if someone were being dragged across the floor, but when the visitors turned to look, the room was empty. The experience left them shaken, and several of them refused to enter the room again for the rest of their visit. Anastasia now believes that the Malachite room is a place where the past and present overlap, where the spirits of the revolution are still present, their final moments replaying in an endless loop. It's as if they're still trying to figure out what went wrong, she says. They're trapped in that moment of chaos and betrayal, unable to move on. For Anastasia, the whispers in the Malachite room have become a constant reminder of the fragility of power. These men thought they were in control, that they could save the government, she says. But in the end, they were swept away by forces beyond their control, and now their voices are all that's left. The Malachite room, once a symbol of imperial power and wealth, became the site of one of the most significant moments in Russian history, the arrest of the provisional government during the October Revolution. The whispers that echo through the room are a haunting reminder of the political intrigue, betrayal, and desperation that defined those final days. For the officials who were arrested, the room represents the end of their power and the beginning of a new era in Russian history. Story 4. The Phantom Footsteps in the Grand Staircase. The Grand Staircase of the Winter Palace is one of the most breathtaking features of the building, with its sweeping marble steps and gilded balustrades. It was here that the imperial family would make their grand entrances during state functions, and it was also here that the Bolsheviks stormed the palace in 1917, rushing up the staircase to seize control of the government. But the Grand Staircase is not just a place of historical significance. It is also said to be haunted by the ghosts of those who fought and died during the storming of the palace. Visitors and staff alike have reported hearing the sound of heavy boots echoing on the marble steps, as if an invisible army is marching up the staircase, reliving the battle that changed the course of Russian history. The Grand Staircase, with its ornate design and towering columns, is a place of grandeur and elegance. But for those who work in the palace, it is also a place of tension. The sound of footsteps is most often heard late at night, when the palace is empty and the halls are silent. The footsteps are described as heavy and deliberate, as if a group of soldiers is marching up the stairs in unison. The sound grows louder with each step, but no one is ever seen. Victor, a maintenance worker at the Hermitage, had heard the stories of the phantom footsteps for years, but had never experienced them himself, until one night when he was cleaning the Grand Staircase after hours. The palace was quiet, the only sound the soft hum of the air conditioning as Victor polished the marble steps. As he worked, he heard a faint sound coming from the base of the staircase. Footsteps, slow and deliberate, as if someone were walking up the stairs. At first, Victor thought it was one of his colleagues, but when he turned to look, the staircase was empty. The sound continued, growing louder with each step, until it seemed to fill the entire staircase. Victor felt a chill run down his spine as the footsteps approached, but still, no one was there. The sound was unmistakable, the heavy boots of soldiers marching in unison, their steps echoing off the marble walls. Victor stood frozen in place, watching as the invisible soldiers climbed the staircase, their footsteps growing louder and louder until they reached the top step. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the sound stopped. The staircase was silent once more, but Victor could still feel the presence of the soldiers, as if they were standing right beside him, waiting for orders that would never come. In the days that followed, Victor couldn't stop thinking about the phantom footsteps. He returned to the Grand Staircase several times, hoping to hear the sound again, but it wasn't until the anniversary of the October Revolution that the haunting resumed. On the night of the anniversary, several staff members reported hearing the footsteps, each describing the same heavy, deliberate march. One staff member, Elena, claimed to have seen shadowy figures at the base of the staircase, their outlines barely visible in the dim light. She described the figures as tall and imposing, their faces obscured by shadows, but their presence unmistakable. The sound of the footsteps grew louder as the night wore on, and several staff members refused to go near the staircase, fearing that the ghosts of the soldiers were still marching up the steps, reliving the storming of the palace. For Victor, the experience of hearing the phantom footsteps has left him deeply unnerved. "It's like they're still here," he says. "The soldiers who stormed the palace, the ones who died trying to take control, they're still marching, still fighting. They're trapped in that moment, and their footsteps will never stop." The Grand Staircase, once a place of imperial grandeur, became the site of one of the most dramatic moments in the October Revolution. The sound of the phantom footsteps is a reminder of the violence and chaos that engulfed the palace as the Bolsheviks seized control. The soldiers who stormed the palace, many of whom were young and inexperienced, left their mark on history, and their spirits seemed to linger in the very stones of the staircase. The Winter Palace is a place where history and the supernatural seem to intersect, where the ghosts of the past still walk among the living, their stories echoing through the grand halls and opulent rooms. The phantoms of the October Revolution, Serena Alexandra, the soldier in the Red Room, the whispering voices in the Malachite Room, and the phantom footsteps on the Grand Staircase are more than just ghost stories. They are a reflection of the deep political, social, and personal turmoil that defined one of the most significant moments in Russian history. The October Revolution was a time of immense change, when the old world was swept away and a new one took its place. But the spirits of those who lived through that tumultuous time remain, their voices and footsteps a haunting reminder that history is never truly forgotten. The Winter Palace, with its grandeur and its ghosts, stands as a testament to the lives lost and the world transformed by the revolution. As you walk through the halls of the Winter Palace, remember the phantoms of the past, the people who lived, fought, and died in the pursuit of a new world. Their spirits are still here, waiting in the shadows, whispering their stories to anyone who will listen.